India's group captain, Gagan Yatri, Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla, participated in a very successful mission to the International Space Station, which was spearheaded by Axiom Space. Group Captain Shukla spent 18 days at the International Space Station, becoming the second Indian astronaut to go into space. Axiom Space is spearheaded by Mr. Tejpaul Bhatia. He has roots from India, a computer scientist from Columbia University, and somebody who made sure that India got onto the Axiom 4 flight, which I sometimes called Mission Akash Ganga. He is also famous for his startup called Chartwala. We won't talk about Chartwala today, but we'll talk about his flights into space. Tejpaul, thanks a lot for speaking to me.
Thank you so much. You mentioned my family's roots from India. I was born in the U.S. and raised here, and this mission for Axiom, for the U.S., for India, and for the world was extremely powerful and important and valuable, but also for my family on a personal level. This was something that really brought everyone together, and it made all of us proud. And, just, for your audience and everyone, being born in the US and having an American accent, some people like to say Indian hardware, but American software. I also want to say to the audience, namaskar, sat sri akal, salam. It's very powerful that we did this together.
So it was payback time for India for you and your family?
Payback is an interesting choice of words. Let's say we're creating value together, and the way this happens is these connections. I've never done business in India, right? And 5 years ago, I'd never done business in space. And for us to be able to, in a very short period of time, come together and do this, some people will say, oh, because he's Indian. And that's not at all the reason. Sometimes I expected that what people want to see is what you'd expect from a space CEO from Texas. And what I want to show everyone is what a space CEO from Texas looks like. It's me. So this is the new world, and this is what it takes. No single country, no single company can get off the planet on its own. So we have to do this together, and I think India and Axiom together proved it.
Yeah. Let's start at the beginning. You made a impossible possible, and that seems to be the motto of your life also, where you made a blind call to the Indian embassy, and from there it started. Just recount for us how it happened.
Yeah, so 5 years ago, I made a personal investment in Axiom. When I learned that this company had the exclusive right to connect its space station to the International Space Station, I said I have to be a part of this. Whether that impossible dream will ever happen, this is 5 years ago, I know that this is what I can do. I'll say my undeniability of doing the impossible is proven, but it's also strange. I have a desire to do the impossible, because when we do the impossible, we show the rest of the world what possible is. The bar for possibility keeps going up. So when I first joined the company, my mandate as Chief Revenue Officer was sell these missions, fill these crews that go to space. And my hypothesis was that the entire world working together, finding this commercial avenue to go to space, is how we as a species will get off planet. So our first several deals were with Saudi Arabia, Italy, Sweden, Turkey, Poland, Hungary. And 2 years ago, I got a call from a very special friend of mine who lives in Monaco, and he said, "Why haven't you called India yet?" And I felt a little strange, and I said, "With all due respect, sir, how do you know I haven't called?" And he said, "Because you just gave it away." And I said, "What do you want?" He said, "Just call them." And so this was this chance call that we talked about. I'll specifically name the person. It was a gentleman named Krunal Joshi. He was a space attaché at the Indian embassy. I believe he's back now on a different role in Bangalore, and he was my first connection. We actually met for the first time in Las Vegas. I got his phone number, and I really mean this. I randomly called him. No email, no assistance connecting him. I called him, and we both happened to be at this conference. We met for coffee. And I would say that meeting, we walked away thinking this is not even going to happen. But we became friends. Let's keep talking. And then I met him in Washington a few times. He introduced me to the then ambassador, Mr. Taranjit Sardarji, who was, is a very wonderful diplomat. And through him, I met Minister Jaishankar, and the conversation started to take a very elevated angle, much bigger than a mission, and then this grew to, NASA, ISRO conversation. Then it grew to White House, Government of India conversation. Next thing we know, President Modi is with President Biden, and they made that announcement for the mission. And that's when we knew it was us. So that's when it all started. And this whole story is less than 2 years. From that phone call to when Shubhanshu stepped back. I don't know if you saw the videos we did on a Milne ceremony where we took the flowers on all the crew. That was less than 2 years. Imagine the two largest democracies, which you can also say two largest bureaucracies, coming together that quickly to send an entire nation for the first time to the International Space Station, along with two other nations for the first time going to the International Space Station. That's the power of this moment.
And both governments changed in between.
Yes. That was arguably the most impossible part because of law. I know laws were changed in this. That's not something I can do. The impossible, I cannot. Maybe some people on my team can help with that. But also saying, having never done business in India and not even understanding the legal system during an election, for the Indian government to be able to do this mission with a startup in the US. And remind you, I wasn't CEO at the time, and not that that would have made a difference, but there was literally only one path that this could have been done, and we took the shot and it worked.
Wonderful. And it went off successfully. And now let's get on straight to the mission. When the mission happened, there were several hiccups. One of them was the long quarantine. Was that a learning experience for you as well?
Yes, I wouldn't call these hiccups. This is normal. Now, what's not normal about it is it's not normal. The average person cannot understand this. So we have done 4 missions now, AX1 through 4. I think 4 maybe had the longest delay, but it's different. These launch dates are set well in advance with a language called no earlier than, because we know it's not going to happen. That doesn't mean it's going to happen on that day. Later than when it comes to human spaceflight, because you can't control things like the weather, and you don't want to take any shortcuts when it comes to human life. So often what happens is the first several shifts are large, a quarter at a time, then maybe months, then weeks, and then it comes to a point where there's a window, and you have a launch window where there are several opportunities for you to launch. And you don't ever want to miss a launch opportunity, but you're not going to take any risk. Simple things like the weather, not just in Florida, but along the whole East Coast as the mission's going up. So these are a lot of variables that you can't control. So the learning opportunity wasn't about the delays. And like I said, it wasn't hiccups. This is all normal. The least normal part about it is how you explain that to the public, right? If you haven't been through human spaceflight, it's very difficult to understand. And that was the point of the mission. This was a training mission where Axiom could work with ISRO, the government of Hungary, European Space Agency for the Polish, and we can all learn together. So it was definitely a learning opportunity for the crew and the countries. For us, the biggest learning opportunity was the collaboration of all 4 nations, because this is the first time you have the US, India, Hungary, and Poland together. So when we were all in the rooms in Florida discussing the various delays, some weather, some mechanical, some on the ISS, which I assure you all 3 have happened to us on every mission. There's some element of this. This was a little more, I think, amplified because of how many people were watching. And again, not something that everyone understands, nor do I think we really need to educate the world on, because in the future, it may not be like this, right? It may be more like airplanes. Let's hope it gets to that level.
Sure.
But right now, it's a very complex industry. So I think the biggest learning for all of us is when we're sitting together in that room, we're representing the world. So how do we communicate this out to our stakeholders, government, press, citizens, taxpayers, investors for our part? And this was the biggest learning, that we did things like that. And it
Now,
felt very good.
now, see, there was that particular moment when there was a leak on the Falcon-9 rocket. And SpaceX almost seemed to be ready to fly it within a day after the leak was detected by them. Now, what transpired there, and what was ISRO's role and your role in trying to make sure that the mission still goes up despite having oxygen leak?
Sure. So, I'll first speak about Axiom and our relationship and position with SpaceX and NASA when it comes to launches, and then I'll bring it back to the crew and India's role and how we all work together. So, we are extremely aligned with SpaceX and NASA when it comes to these launches. SpaceX is the expert, obviously the expert on launch. We're not a launch company, right? We do the mission preparation, the training, pulling the programs together, the payloads, and making sure the crew is up and coming back safely, but the vehicle is SpaceX's. So if they say don't go, that's what we follow. NASA is the main operating partner of the International Space Station. That's their call, right? So never is Axiom going to supersede any decision made by those partners when it comes to human safety. If anything, we might supersede in the opposite direction because our risk posture is very different, right? This is our customer's crew. It's not NASA astronauts, right? Or it's not the risk of the government with their astronauts already up there. So with the leak, I will also say these things are normal, right? When you look at a company like SpaceX and how many successful launches they've done, successful human launches they've done, and look now what they're doing with the larger rocket, they know what they're doing, right? So some risks that come, the computer tells you things, humans tell you things, and some risks are mitigated, some are dealt with, and there's a lot of variables in that. And both computers and humans are watching it till the second it launches. So they're not going to take any risk when it comes to this. So already I think that's okay. Where India's role played in is, again, coming back to the fact that we're all one team. So we're all sitting in the room and we're talking, and the ISRO chairman, Dr. Narayanan, he's a propulsion engineer, right?
Yes.
So sitting and being able to speak with SpaceX, it was a very beautiful thing to see. It was a collaboration that I haven't seen before. Also, it's difficult for me to understand as a software engineer, right? But seeing the engineering teams on both sides, and then also being able to understand the diplomatic side and the public perception. That even if we explain this fully to everyone with all the details, it's still going to be very difficult for the public to understand. And what we do know from all of our missions is nobody remembers the delays. Right now, think about when Shuks and Tejpaul landed back in India. Think about what we're talking about right now. Those delays, people don't remember. However, what people do remember are the successes, and that's what really what I think was the biggest learning there.
Did it give you anxious moments when the ISRO chairman put his foot down?
Anxious moments, let me just say the whole thing is anxious. These are humans going to space. I have a saying in my company that we don't celebrate till they're back home.
Absolutely.
We don't celebrate when we sign the contract. We don't celebrate when the money comes in. We don't celebrate when they launch. We celebrate when they come home. And often we forget to celebrate because we're on to the next thing. But this is why that Milne ceremony was so important to us. Obviously, there's a connection, for me. Actually, we named our son. His name is, we call him Milan. In India, people would say million.
Wow.
But it actually came from that concept of unification of families. So the important thing for me, not just was, I knew this would be an important moment for India. It would be an important moment for me. But if you notice, we did the same thing with Poland. We did the same thing with Hungary. We did the same thing with Peggy. We actually made the flowers, the garlands, the flags. The reason for doing that was I sent a note to my team and said, I've been saying this for 4 years. This is my first mission as CEO. We will celebrate. We will celebrate, and we'll do this with our partners, with our brothers and sisters when they come home.
Now, going forward, is there a possibility of a more continuous partnership with the Indian Space Research Organization because they have a human space program coming up, and Group Captain Shukla has laid the first baby steps for India's Gaganyaan program?
Yes, very much so. So, this mission was just the beginning. I'll say it's the beginning of many beginnings. And like I said before, no single country, no single company can do this on their own. And I think India knows this better than everyone else. And what India has done in the last, few years, since I've been in the space industry, in terms of launch, going to the moon, going to the sun, building its own station, and now the AX4 mission, India solidified its position as the fourth space superpower. And we knew this actually before. The Director General of the European Space Agency, Josef Aschbacher, said this before the mission to the moon. It was the Friday or the before that India is the fourth space superpower. I spoke very specifically to Dr. Jaishankar about this. What does this mean in terms of commercialization? What does it mean in terms of policy? What does it mean in terms of diplomacy for the world? So I'd say, everything about our mission was not about a human spaceflight, was not about Shuk sitting in one of those four seats. I think it's all beautiful. And I think the way the story was told by Axiom and by the people of India is incredible. But underneath all this is a joint learning, a joint training, and a roadmap. And as India goes and builds its human spaceflight program, its launch program, its station program, its lunar program, remember, Axiom has been doing these missions every year and will continue to do that. Axiom is building its own station, and we will support India in any possible way that they want to work, whether it's interoperability, connectivity, or shared insights. And then we have our spacesuits program. And in the lead up to the AX4 mission, the chairman of ISRO and his team spent several weeks with us here in Houston. This is before we even went to Florida, and did quite a bit of diligence and feedback on all of our various programs. So I believe this is the beginning of a very long relationship.
Why are your missions so costly? Nearly $65 million for one seat. Why don't you make them cheaper? There'll be a lot more people who'll be joining in. I know you have only 4 mission contract from NASA, but you'll get more.
Yes, I think there's two things. One, it's all relative. Imagine if India had to do this on its own right now. Forget even India, anybody having to do this. We can go back 20 years. We can go back to the US shuttle program. What we're saying, is expensive at 65, 70 million. That would have cost billions just 2 decades ago, right? So already it's relative. Now, yes, it's very expensive. Let's not be crazy for it, but the value that's created. So let's think of those dollars as a monetary system. It is actually money, right? And there's a credit and a debt and a balance that has to come from it. But the balance is not actually $1 comes in and you get this service for it. Yes, that's the credit and debt we're talking about. But the value that was created by this mission is maybe 1,000x that. What does this actually? I won't even go to the tangible yet, and I can prove it to you. Over 1 billion people, 300 million children just in India watch this. I can go back to my pivotal moment in life when my parents took me to Kennedy Space Center, and that began my obsession. 300 million kids just went through that, girls and boys. I spoke to a high school student, and how many want to go to space, how many want to work in aerospace, how many were inspired by the mission. All those hands went up. Imagine when my father was in high school. When he was sitting there, if someone came and said, how many want to come to America? Everyone's hand would have come up. That's not what I asked the students. Think about what they're doing. Think about what they're doing for their country. Think about what they're doing for the world. That alone, priceless. Now let's talk about the programs. What India just learned for a drop in the bucket is going to set that human spaceflight program, not just up for India, but for Axiom and for the rest of the world, because we'll be looking to India and say, okay, help us. How do we get up there?
Now, do you want to partner with India on India's rockets? And how do you plan to partner with Skyroot, with whom you already have an MOU?
Yes, absolutely. I mentioned how this mission and discussion started, with the Indian Embassy in DC. This is actually where it started, right? As we look at the ecosystem, as we look at the nations, spacefaring nations, and how we all collaborate and share in what we call a capabilities marketplace, India's power is going to be that. And what's amazing about what India is doing in the space program right now is it is a public-private partnership unlike we've ever seen. You have ISRO, but you also have InSpace and NSIL, and then you have this, I was going to say burgeoning, but you have this flourishing space startup industry. And when I came to India last, I told you I went to Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad. I did my government meetings. I did my meetings for Axiom, but I also did several meetings with venture capitalists. And not Indian, I mean, they were all Indian and they had an Indian office, but many venture capital firms that are in Silicon Valley in New York that have an India practice. And they're invested in companies like Skyroot, who we have an MOU with. But what you'll see very quickly is the Indian space program is going to accelerate and leapfrog because of this joint effort.
So what do you do with Skyroot?
So with Skyroot, our MOU crosses several items. Obviously, us using them for launch capabilities, for cargo, light cargo, heavy cargo, and hopefully one day, much heavier cargo and human spaceflight. I don't want to speak for their roadmap at all, but if you have had a chance to go see their facilities in Hyderabad, it's amazing.
I have. Now let's very quickly end with what are the future plans? Because you already have a plan to have a space station with Axiom, which will connect to the International Space Station. India also has a plan to have a space station, and you're already making the spacesuit for the Artemis program where astronauts would land on the moon. Tell me a little bit about that very quickly.
So it's, the roadmap is basically around 3 product lines. What I'll say is the station, the suits, and what I'm starting to call labs. This includes the mission, but also remember, Shubhanshu did some incredible science and research on the mission. We don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but experiments with microalgae and microgravity and crop seeding, things that will maintain life support and agriculture in space and on Earth. It's amazing. So I'm just bundling missions all with labs because that's how we've been doing the experiments. Putting that aside, the space station, Axiom Space Station, as I mentioned, we have the exclusive right through our contract to attach to the ISS. Our plan is the first module attaches to the ISS. The second, once it's ready and up, about a year later, they will connect and it'll become a free flying station. And this must happen before the end of life of the ISS. With India developing its program in the shared learnings, and like I said, hopefully interoperability and maybe connectivity of the stations, this is what we're exploring and discussing. And the goal here is to accelerate both roadmaps. On the spacesuits, Axiom is the sole provider of spacesuits for the Artemis missions. Next human who steps on the moon will be wearing an Axiom spacesuit. What's very interesting is why would Axiom get that contract? Well, we were building spacesuits for our station. We need them. The architecture is relatively similar. Obviously, you're walking on a celestial body on the moon and you're floating around in space, but it's a natural fit. So I think, as being that sole provider for suits and India being not just an ally for the US, but being a values-based ally, and you see this in the business and the cross Indo-US investment that we're seeing. I think it's a very natural fit that this collaboration together will accelerate humanity off the planet for the entire world, not just for the US and India.
So excited about the Indo-US partnership going forward in space?
Very much so.
But that was...
I'm very happy. Both Kushant and I'll next time we do it in person, I'll come visit you in Delhi.
That'd be so nice of you. So that was Mr. Tejpaul Bhatia, the Chief Executive Officer of Axiom Space, the company which spearheaded Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla's mission to the International Space Station. Hopefully, there would be many more missions which India, America, and the private companies in India and Axiom Space should be able to do. And anyways, the motto of Mr. Bhatia is making the impossible possible. So who knows maybe together Indians and Americans can land on the moon on a mission which is launched using Axiom suits and a rocket from India. The future is very bright for India and America. India, the world's largest democracy, and America, the world's oldest democracy. Whenever they have worked together, they have created magic in science and technology. Thanks a lot for speaking to me, Mr. Bhatia. Let's meet in person soon, and let's make sure that we have many more successful missions. And thanks a lot for taking Shubhanshu up and for the happy splashdown.
Thank you.
Namaskar, and thank you.